Emma Chen was only 14 when she found the creature dying in the woods behind her grandmother's farm. The October afternoon was crisp and golden, leaves crunching under her boots as she searched for the perfect maple branch for her school science project. She had wandered farther than usual, following a deer trail that wound deeper into the forest than she had ever explored. The smell hit her first, something sharp and metallic like copper pennies left in the rain. Then she heard the sound, a low rumbling that wasn't quite breathing and wasn't quite growling. It came from a small clearing just ahead, where the sunlight filtered through the canopy in dusty shafts. Emma pushed through a curtain of hanging vines and stopped dead in her tracks. The creature was massive, easily twice the size of her father's prize bull, but built like nothing she had ever seen in any nature documentary. Its body was covered in scales that shifted color from deep purple to silver as it moved, and it had 6 legs that ended in claws, capable of tearing through tree trunks. A long serpentine tail lay coiled around its body, and its head bore a crest of bone spikes that made it look like a dragon from her favorite fantasy novels. But it was clearly dying. One of its legs was twisted at an impossible angle, and a dark fluid that might have been blood seeped from wounds across its body. Its breathing was labored, each exhale creating small clouds in the cool air. When it sensed her presence, its head lifted, revealing eyes that were startlingly intelligent and utterly alien, compound like an insect's, but with depth that suggested complex thought. Emma's first instinct was to run. Everything about the creature screamed predator, from its razor-sharp claws to the rows of teeth visible in its partially open mouth. Her grandmother had always warned her about the dangers in the deep woods, though she had never mentioned anything like this. But something kept her feet planted where they were. Maybe it was the way the creature's eyes held hers without aggression, or the fact that it made no move to attack despite clearly being aware of her presence. Or maybe it was simply that Emma had always been the kind of girl who brought home injured birds and insisted on nursing them back to health. The creature watched her with those strange, multifaceted eyes as she took a cautious step forward. Its breathing hitched and a sound escaped its throat that was almost like a sigh. Emma could see that its wounds were severe, burns that looked like they came from some kind of energy weapon, deep gashes that exposed what might have been bone beneath the scaled hide. "Hey there," she whispered, her voice barely audible even to herself. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The creature's head tilted slightly as if it was trying to understand her words. One of its smaller arms, Emma realized it had 4 arms in addition to the 6 legs, moved weakly toward her, then fell back to the ground. Emma looked around the clearing, taking in the scene more carefully. There were scorch marks on several trees and what looked like pieces of metallic debris scattered among the fallen leaves. This hadn't been a natural accident. The creature had been in some kind of fight or crash, and it had lost badly. She pulled her phone from her pocket, but the screen showed no signal bars. They were too deep in the woods, too far from any cell tower. Even if she could call for help, who would she call? The police? Animal control? How do you explain finding a creature that shouldn't exist? The decision came easier than it should have. Emma sat down cross-legged just out of reach of those massive claws and began to talk. "I don't know what you are or where you came from," she said softly, "but you're hurt, and you're scared, and nobody should have to die alone." The creature's eyes focused on her with what seemed like surprise. Its breathing, which had been rapid and shallow, began to slow slightly. "My name is Emma," she continued, pulling her jacket tighter around herself as the afternoon air grew cooler. "I live with my grandmother just over that hill. She's teaching me about plants and animals, though I bet she's never seen anything like you." She talked about school, about her friends, about the science project that had brought her into the woods in the first place. She talked about her grandmother's stories, about the books she loved to read, about her dreams of becoming a veterinarian someday. The creature listened, its alien eyes never leaving her face. As the sun began to set, painting the clearing in shades of orange and gold, Emma noticed that the creature's breathing was becoming more labored. Its eyes were dulling, and the occasional movements of its limbs were growing weaker. "Are you in pain?" she asked gently. The creature made a sound that was almost like a whisper, though no human throat could have produced it. One of its smaller arms moved again, and this time Emma was close enough to see that it was reaching toward her. Without thinking about the danger, she extended her own hand and gently touched what might have been the creature's wrist. The scales were surprisingly warm, and she could feel a pulse beneath them that was rapid but growing fainter. "I'm sorry this happened to you," she whispered. "I'm sorry you're so far from home, wherever that is. But you're not alone, okay? I'm here with you." The creature's eyes focused on her one last time, and Emma could swear she saw something like gratitude in their alien depths. Its breathing slowed, became irregular, then stopped altogether. Emma sat in the growing darkness for a long time, her hand still resting on the creature's cooling scales. She didn't cry, she wasn't sure why, but tears didn't seem appropriate somehow. Instead, she felt a strange sense of privilege, as if she had been chosen to witness something important. Eventually, she made her way home through the moonlit forest, her grandmother's worried questions washing over her like background noise. She told no one about what she had found, though she wasn't entirely sure why. Some instinct told her that the creature's death was meant to remain private, at least for now. That night, Emma dreamed of vast spaces between stars, of ships like silver tears falling through the void, and of eyes that held intelligence older than human civilization. She woke with the strange certainty that something significant had changed, though she couldn't say exactly what. She had no way of knowing that the creature she had comforted wore technology that recorded everything, every word she had spoken, every gentle touch, every moment of compassion she had shown to a dying enemy of her species. She had no way of knowing that somewhere in the depths of space, that recording was already being transmitted across impossible distances to a fleet of ships that had been hunting the creature for months. Emma Chen went to school the next day like any normal teenager, carrying books and worrying about tests, completely unaware that her whispered words of comfort had just changed the course of human history. 24 hours after Emma found the dying creature, the first ships appeared in Earth's outer solar system. Dr. Maria Santos was working the night shift at the Arecibo Observatory when her instruments detected something that made her blood run cold. The readings were impossible. Multiple objects, each larger than a city, had appeared beyond Pluto's orbit as if materializing from empty space itself. "Check the calibration," she muttered to herself, running through diagnostic routines that came up clean every time. The objects were real. They were massive, and they were heading directly toward Earth at speeds that violated everything humanity understood about physics. Within hours, emergency protocols activated across the globe. Military satellites tracked the approaching fleet while world leaders were roused from sleep to face humanity's first confirmed contact with alien intelligence. The objects were clearly artificial, geometric shapes that no natural process could create, moving in perfect formation with purpose that spoke of advanced intelligence. Commander Sarah Mitchell stood in the Pentagon's Crisis Center, watching displays that showed the approaching fleet with a mixture of awe and terror. 17 ships, each one shaped like an elongated teardrop made of what appeared to be liquid metal. They moved without visible propulsion, their surfaces rippling and flowing as if alive. "Estimated time to Earth orbit?" she asked the technician monitoring the tracking station. "At current velocity, approximately 6 hours, ma'am." "But ma'am?" The young man's voice cracked slightly. "Their deceleration pattern suggests they're not planning an attack approach. They're moving more like they're planning to stop." The statement sent ripples of confusion through the command center. Every invasion scenario humanity had ever imagined involved hostile aliens arriving with obvious aggressive intent. These ships were clearly powerful enough to destroy Earth's entire military with minimal effort. Yet their approach suggested something else entirely. President Catherine Walsh stood before a hastily assembled joint session of Congress, her words being broadcast simultaneously to world leaders via secure channels. "We are facing an unprecedented situation. We have confirmed contact with an alien intelligence, and their intentions remain unknown. I have authorized our military to prepare for any possibility, while simultaneously attempting to establish communication." The attempts at communication began immediately. Radio telescopes beamed mathematical sequences, prime numbers, and basic scientific concepts toward the approaching fleet. Every frequency was tried, every protocol that xenolinguistics experts had theoretical knowledge of. For hours there was no response. Then, as the ships entered the outer edge of the solar system proper, everything changed. Every radio telescope on Earth, every communications satellite, every electronic device capable of receiving signals, simultaneously activated with the same transmission. The message came not in radio waves or standard electromagnetic radiation, but in something that bypassed normal physics entirely, and spoke directly to human consciousness. The voice that filled every human mind was ancient, vast and completely alien, yet somehow each person heard it in their own language, with perfect clarity and understanding. We are the Kethmaran. We have journeyed from the void between stars seeking one who died far from the hunting grounds of his people. We have found his final moments preserved in the memory of his biosuit, and we have heard the words spoken to him as he passed from this existence to the next. Panic erupted in command centers around the world. The aliens had bypassed every security measure, every attempt at controlled first contact, and spoken directly to the entire human population simultaneously. The technology required for such a feat was beyond human comprehension. We know that humans fear us, the voice continued, and now there was something in its tone that might have been sadness. Our people are hunters and warriors. We have pursued the one you found across 7 star systems, for he had committed crimes against our kind that demanded justice. When he crashed upon your world, we expected to find his body and return him to face judgment among the dead. The transmission paused, and in that silence every human on Earth held their breath. Instead, we found something we did not expect. We found mercy. Emma Chen sat in her high school physics class, staring at the emergency broadcast playing on every screen in the building. Around her, classmates whispered nervously, but she felt something different, a strange calm, as if she was listening to a conversation she had been expecting without knowing it. The criminal we hunted was dying alone, far from any who knew his name or his deeds. He was our enemy, deserving of capture and punishment, yet a human child sat with him as he died. She spoke words of comfort to one who had killed members of her own species in other systems. She offered companionship to one who deserved only justice. The teacher had stopped attempting to maintain order. Every student in the classroom was transfixed by the impossible voice speaking directly into their minds. This act confuses us. In 3,000 years of hunting across the galaxy, we have never encountered a species that shows kindness to its enemies. We have never found people who comfort those who would destroy them. We came to Earth prepared for war, expecting to face another aggressive species that would fight us for the right to shelter criminals. Emma's hands were shaking now. She understood with growing certainty that the creature in the forest had been the subject of this vast hunt, and that somehow her simple act of staying with it as it died had changed everything. We must understand this, Mercy. We must comprehend how a species develops compassion that extends even to enemies. Our ships will remain in your system while we study this phenomenon. We will not interfere with your civilization, but we must learn from you. The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving 8 billion humans in stunned silence. In the command centers, military leaders scrambled to understand what had just happened. The aliens had essentially announced their intention to study humanity, like specimens in a laboratory. They possessed technology that could override every communication system on Earth simultaneously, ships that could cross interstellar distances, and the power to impose their will on the entire human species. But they had also spoken of mercy, of confusion over human compassion, of learning rather than conquering. It was the most hopeful and terrifying first contact scenario anyone had ever imagined. Dr. Santos continued monitoring the alien fleet as it settled into orbit around Earth. The ships arranged themselves in a perfect geometric pattern that seemed to incorporate mathematical relationships humanity was only beginning to understand. They made no aggressive moves, launched no probes, fired no weapons. They simply waited, their liquid metal surfaces rippling with patterns that hurt to look at directly. They're not hostile, she reported to the emergency council, but they're not exactly friendly either. They're curious. It's like they're trying to solve a puzzle. And we're the puzzle. Emma walked home from school in a daze, her mind reeling from the realization that her private moment with a dying creature had somehow triggered the arrival of an alien fleet. The weight of unintended consequences pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. Her grandmother was waiting on the porch, her weathered face creased with worry. "Emma, dear, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Emma looked up at the evening sky, where the alien ships were visible as points of silver light moving in patterns no human technology could achieve. "Grandma," she said quietly, "I think I need to tell you about something that happened in the woods yesterday." As she began to speak, neither of them could know that every word of her story was being monitored by technology beyond human understanding, or that the alien fleet was analyzing every nuance of human behavior. with the intensity of scientists studying a completely new form of life. B. Kethmaran had come seeking a criminal and had found something that challenged everything they thought they knew about intelligent species. Now they faced a question that would determine the future of both civilizations. Could a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of war learn anything meaningful from a species that instinctively chose mercy over justice? The answer would depend on a 14-year-old girl who had whispered comfort to a dying enemy, never knowing that her words would echo across the stars. Aboard the flagship of the Kethmaran fleet, Hunt leader Vexithara stood before a holographic display that showed the final moments of the criminal they had pursued across 7 star systems. The recording played in perfect detail, captured by the biosuit's memory cores and transmitted automatically upon the wearer's death. Vexithara was ancient, even by Kethmaran standards, her chitinous exoskeleton bearing the scars of countless hunts across the galaxy. Her forearms moved in complex patterns as she manipulated the display, replaying the encounter from multiple angles and sensor perspectives. Around her, the ship's council chamber filled with other hunters, all struggling to comprehend what they were witnessing. "Play it again," commanded Hunt Second Krentax, his bioluminescent spots pulsing with confusion. "Focus on the moment when the human child first approaches." The hologram shifted, zooming in on Emma's face as she stepped into the clearing. Every micro-expression was visible, every slight change in her biosignature recorded by sensors designed to track prey across continents. The Kethmaran had expected to see cunning, deception, perhaps an attempt to extract information from their dying quarry. Instead, they saw something that had no equivalent in their language or experience. "She shows no fear scent," observed Hunt Third Zilnova, her sensor analysis training making her the expert on interpreting alien biological responses. Her heart rate increases initially, consistent with startlement, but then decreases below normal resting levels. "This suggests calm acceptance?" "Impossible," rumbled Krentax. "No prey species remains calm in the presence of a Kethmaran hunter, even a dying one. She should be fleeing or preparing to fight." Vexithara gestured, and the recording advanced to the moment when Emma sat down and began speaking. The holographic projection filled with the sound of her voice, translated into Kethmaran through linguistic analysis protocols that had been refined over millennia of contact with dozens of species. "I don't know what you are or where you came from, but you're hurt, and you're scared, and nobody should have to die alone." The words hung in the chamber's recycled atmosphere like a physical presence. Several of the younger hunters' bioluminescent patches flickered with patterns that indicated deep confusion. These were warriors who had spent their lives learning to track, capture, and kill. The concept of comforting an enemy was so foreign that their minds struggled to process it. "She gains nothing from this action," Vexithara said slowly, her mandibles clicking in thought. The criminal was dying. He possessed no information she could extract, no resources she could claim. Her species was unknown to him, so he could not have provided intelligence about potential threats. "There is no strategic benefit to her behavior. Perhaps it's a form of psychological warfare," suggested Hunt Fourth Morkelks. "Some species use apparent kindness to lower an enemy's defenses before striking." The recording continued to play, showing Emma's gentle touch on the dying hunter's arm, her whispered words of comfort as his biosigns faded to nothing. The sensors detected no deception in her voice patterns, no hidden weapons or concealed threats. She was exactly what she appeared to be, a young member of her species offering comfort to a dying enemy, for no reason other than the belief that no one should die alone. "There is no strike," Zilnova reported after running the data through every combat analysis protocol in their database. "She remains with him until death, then leaves without taking anything. No trophies, no proof of encounter, no attempt to access his technology. She simply stays." Hunt leader Vexithara had been alive for over 800 years. She had hunted across 47 star systems and personally brought to justice criminals whose names were legend among her people. She had seen every form of intelligent behavior that evolution could produce, from the crystal-based hive minds of the Andorian sector to the energy plasma collectives of the galactic Rim. But she had never seen this. "Bring me the xenobiologist reports on this species," she commanded. "Everything we know about human psychology and social structures." The data flowed across the holographic display in streams of bioluminescent text, Humans were relatively young as spacefaring species went, having only recently achieved interplanetary travel. They were omnivorous pack hunters with complex social hierarchies, advanced tool use, and a remarkable capacity for both cooperation and conflict. Here, Zilnova highlighted a section of the analysis. Humans demonstrate an unusual psychological trait their scientists call empathy. They possess the ability to understand and share the emotional experiences of others, including members of different species. Many species possess empathy for their own kind, Krentax noted. It's an evolutionary advantage for social creatures. But humans extend this empathy to their enemies, Zilnova continued, her patches flickering with amazement. They have documented cases of showing compassion to captured opponents, of providing medical aid to those who have attacked them, of mourning the deaths of creatures they have never met. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Kethmaran had built their entire civilization around the principle of justice through strength. Criminals were hunted down regardless of the cost or distance involved. Enemies were defeated and eliminated. There was no place in their worldview for showing mercy to those who had committed crimes against them. "Show me their history," Vexithara commanded. The holographic display filled with images from human history, wars and conflicts spanning thousands of years, but also acts of incredible compassion and self-sacrifice. Humans who had risked their lives to save enemies during wartime, medical personnel who treated captured soldiers with the same care they gave their own wounded, individuals who had forgiven those who had caused them terrible harm. They are warriors, Morkelks observed, studying images of human military technology. Their capacity for violence rivals our own, yet they choose mercy when victory would be easier. Not all of them, Zilnova corrected, highlighting examples of human cruelty and warfare. They are capable of great darkness as well as great light. But the light is what makes them unique. No other species we have encountered has produced such consistent examples of choosing compassion over conquest. Vexithara gestured, and the recording returned to the moment when Emma placed her hand on the dying hunter's arm. The gesture was so simple, so effortless, yet it represented something that challenged the fundamental assumptions of Kethmaran civilization. The child gains nothing, she mused aloud. Risks much. What if the hunter had retained enough strength to harm her? Yet she chooses to offer comfort anyway. This is not weakness, because her species is clearly capable of violence when necessary. This is not naivety, because she acknowledges that she doesn't know what he is or where he comes from. This is, she paused, searching for words that didn't exist in her language. This is something new. The council chamber's bioluminescent panels dimmed as the senior hunters contemplated the implications. For 3,000 years, the Kethmaran had been the galaxy's arbiters of justice, hunting down criminals and threats with unwavering dedication. They had seen themselves as necessary predators, keeping the cosmic ecosystem in balance through strength and determination. But now they had encountered a species that suggested a different path. Humans seemed to possess strength without cruelty, justice tempered by mercy, and the ability to see enemies as individuals worthy of compassion. "What are your orders, Hunt Leader?" Krentax asked finally. Vexithara stood motionless for long moments, her forearms folded in a posture of deep contemplation. The decision she made now would affect not just this hunt, but potentially the entire future of her species. "We will observe," she said finally. "We will study this phenomenon called compassion, and we will determine whether the Kethmaran have something to learn from a species that chooses to comfort its enemies instead of simply destroying them. And the human child who showed mercy to our quarry." Vexithara's mandibles clicked in what might have been the beginning of respect. "She will be protected. Any who attempt to harm her will answer to the entire Kethmaran fleet. She has shown us something we did not know existed, and that makes her more valuable than any criminal we have ever hunted." The recording continued to play in an endless loop, showing Emma's simple act of kindness over and over again. But now the Kethmaran watched it not as evidence of an alien's strange behavior, but as a lesson in possibilities they had never imagined. Perhaps strength and mercy were not opposites after all. Perhaps the greatest hunt of all was not for criminals and enemies, but for wisdom itself. Deep in the archives of the Kethmaran flagship, Hunt Keeper Thelmaran accessed records that hadn't been reviewed in over 1,000 years. As the fleet's historian and keeper of cultural memory, she understood that Emma's act of mercy represented more than just an interesting alien behavior. It challenged the very foundation upon which Kethmaran society had been built. The archive chamber was vast, its crystalline walls storing the collective memory of their species stretching back 50,000 years. Bioluminescent displays showed the rise of the Kethmaran from primitive hunters on their homeworld to the galaxy's most feared and respected arbiters of justice. Every hunt, every criminal captured, every world protected by their intervention, all of it was recorded here in perfect detail. Thelmiran began with the founding texts, the sacred records that established the core principles of their civilization. The words glowed in ancient script as she spoke them aloud to the empty chamber. Justice through strength, honor through pursuit, peace through the elimination of those who would disturb it. The Kethmaran are the hunters of the void, and our prey are those who would harm the innocent. For millennia, these words had guided their species across the galaxy. They had become legend among hundreds of worlds. The Kethmaran who would pursue a criminal to the edge of the universe if necessary, who never abandoned a hunt, who brought justice to those who thought themselves beyond reach. But the texts also revealed something that modern Kethmaran rarely discussed. Their species had not always been hunters. Thelmiran accessed records from the earliest period of their civilization, when the Kethmaran had been a peaceful agricultural people who lived in harmony with their world's complex ecosystem. They had been philosophers and artists, scientists and farmers, content to explore the mysteries of their own planet rather than venture into the darkness between stars. Then had come the devastation, the holographic displays filled with images that still haunted Kethmaran nightmares after 40,000 years, ships appearing in their skies without warning, cities burning under weapons that turned matter into energy, entire continents stripped of life by raiders who saw the Kethmaran as nothing more than resources to be harvested. The attack had lasted only 3 days, but it had left their world broken and their people scattered. 90% of their population had been killed or enslaved. Their cities lay in ruins, their culture nearly destroyed, their faith in the basic goodness of intelligent life shattered forever. But the Kethmaran had survived. More than survived. They had transformed themselves. Thelmiran advanced through the records, watching her people's painful evolution from peaceful farmers to galactic hunters. They had studied the technology of their attackers, reverse-engineered their weapons, and devoted themselves to ensuring that what had happened to them would never happen to another innocent species. "We became what we hunted," she whispered to herself. Reading the philosophical writings of the great hunt leader Vex Corin, who had led the first expedition beyond their home system, we learned their cruelty so that we could defeat it. We embraced their methods so that we could turn those methods against them. The transformation had been remarkably successful. Within 1,000 years, the Kethmaran had become the galaxy's most effective force for justice. They hunted down raiders, slavers, and conquerors with relentless efficiency. Their very presence in a system was enough to deter most criminal activity. Peaceful species could develop and flourish under their protection, but the cost had been enormous. Thelmiran accessed psychological profiles of modern Kethmaran, comparing them to records from before the devastation. The changes were dramatic. Where their ancestors had been curious and gentle, modern Kethmaran were focused and ruthless. Where their predecessors had created art and music, her contemporaries created weapons and strategies. Where the ancient ones had celebrated life, the current generation dealt primarily in death. They had become incredibly effective at their chosen role, but they had lost something essential in the process. They had forgotten how to show mercy, because mercy was what had made them vulnerable to the original attack. They had abandoned compassion because compassion was a luxury that hunters could not afford. A soft chime indicated that someone was requesting access to the archives. Thelmiran looked up to see hunt leader Vexithara approaching, her ancient exoskeleton bearing scars that told stories of 100 successful hunts. "I need to understand something," Vexithara said without preamble. "Show me the records of our greatest failures." Thelmiran's bioluminescent patches flickered with surprise. In Kethmaran culture, failures were not discussed. Their perfect record of successful hunts was a source of immense pride. "Hunt leader, our archives show no failed hunts. Every criminal we have pursued has been brought to justice." "That's not what I mean," Vexithara said, settling into a meditation posture before the holographic displays. "I mean the failures we don't record. The times when our pursuit of justice caused more harm than the original crime." The occasions when our methods were too harsh, our judgment too final. Thelmiran hesitated. Such records existed, buried deep in classified sections that were rarely accessed. They documented the unintended consequences of Kethmaran interventions. Innocent beings caught in crossfire, entire ecosystems disrupted by their hunting methods, cultures that had collapsed after losing key individuals to Kethmaran justice. "Show me," Vexthara commanded. The displays filled with images that no modern Kethmaran wanted to confront. A species that had developed art forms requiring complex emotional interactions, but had become sterile and mechanical after the Kethmaran removed several individuals who had committed minor infractions. A world where their pursuit of a single criminal had triggered environmental disasters that killed millions of innocent creatures. Civilizations that had stagnated because the Kethmaran definition of justice didn't account for the cultural context that made rehabilitation possible. We became so focused on punishment that we forgot about healing, Vexithera said quietly, so devoted to strength that we abandoned wisdom. Thelmiran accessed another set of records, philosophical writings from Kethmaran thinkers who had questioned their society's direction over the centuries. Most had been ignored or dismissed as impractical idealists. Hunt philosopher Krenthara wrote extensively about this problem, she noted, highlighting relevant passages. She argued that true justice required understanding the context of actions, not just punishing the actions themselves. She believed that our role should be to heal the damage caused by crime, not simply to eliminate criminals. What happened to her? She died during a hunt 300 years ago. Her theories were considered too dangerous to implement. They might have made us less effective at deterring crime through fear. Vexithara stood and moved closer to the displays, studying the image of the human child comforting their dying quarry. But what if she was right? What if our effectiveness comes not from fear, but from something else entirely? What do you mean? The humans we've been studying, they have criminals too. Wars, conflicts, individuals who harm others. But they also have something we've forgotten how to do. They have the ability to forgive. Thelmiran accessed human historical records, comparing them to Kethmaran methods of justice. The differences were striking. Where the Kethmaran focused on punishment and deterrence, humans had developed complex systems of rehabilitation and restoration. Where her people sought to eliminate threats, humans often sought to understand and heal the underlying causes of harmful behavior. Their methods seem inefficient, Thelmiran observed. They have higher rates of repeat offenses, more escaped criminals, more unresolved conflicts. But they also have something we lost 40,000 years ago, Vexthara replied. They have hope. They believe that even their enemies can change, can grow, can become better than what they were. The hunt leader gestured toward the recording of Emma's final moments with the dying criminal. That child didn't see a threat to be eliminated. She saw a being in pain who needed comfort. In 40,000 years of hunting, has any Kethmaran ever shown such mercy to a quarry? Thelmiran searched the archives, running queries through millions of recorded hunts. The results were absolute. Not once in their recorded history had a Kethmaran shown compassion to a criminal during capture or execution. Never, she confirmed. It would be considered a betrayal of our duty, a dishonor to the victims of the criminal's actions. And yet, Vexithera said slowly, watching that human child's simple act of kindness has affected our entire fleet more profoundly than any victory we've achieved. Why? The question hung in the crystalline air of the archive chamber, like a challenge to everything the Kethmaran believed about themselves. They had spent 40,000 years perfecting the art of justice through strength, but a single act of mercy by a human child had revealed something they had lost along the way. Perhaps, Thelmiran said carefully, we have been so focused on becoming the hunters we needed to be that we forgot who we were before we needed to hunt. Vexithara nodded slowly. And perhaps it's time to remember. Emma Chen stood in her grandmother's kitchen, staring at the official government car that had just pulled into their driveway. 3 days had passed since the Kethmaran fleet's arrival, and the world had transformed into something unrecognizable. Schools were closed, military forces were on high alert, and every television channel showed the same images of alien ships hanging motionless in Earth's sky. Emma, dear, her grandmother said gently, setting down her teacup with hands that trembled slightly. I think those people are here for you. The visitors were exactly what Emma had expected, serious-looking individuals in dark suits who spoke in careful, measured tones and carried credentials from agencies she had only heard about in movies. Agent Sarah Collins from the FBI led the group, flanked by a military liaison and someone introduced simply as Dr. Martinez from the Xenolinguistics Department. "Emma," Agent Collins said after they had settled in the living room, "we need to talk about what happened in the woods 3 days ago." Emma had been dreading this moment, since the alien broadcast had made it clear that her encounter with the dying creature was the reason for their arrival. "I didn't know what it was," she said quietly. I couldn't leave it alone." "We know," Dr. Martinez said, leaning forward with an expression of genuine curiosity rather than accusation. "What we need to understand is everything you remember about the encounter. Every word you spoke, every detail of the creature's appearance, anything that might help us understand why the Kethmaran responded the way they did." Over the next 2 hours, Emma recounted her experience in the forest. The officials took careful notes, asked detailed questions, and occasionally exchanged glances that suggested they were hearing things that surprised them. When she finished, Agent Collins sat back with an expression of profound thoughtfulness. "Emma, I need you to understand something. According to our analysis of the Kethmaran broadcast, your actions may have prevented a potential conflict between our species. These aliens are incredibly powerful, and they came here expecting to deal with a hostile civilization that harbored their enemies." "But I didn't harbor anyone," Emma protested. "I just found him dying and stayed with him." "That's exactly the point," Dr. Martinez said with something approaching awe in his voice. "You showed mercy to a being you knew nothing about, who could have been dangerous, who belonged to a species unknown to you. The Kethmaran apparently have no cultural framework for understanding that kind of behavior." Emma's grandmother, who had been listening quietly from her chair by the window, spoke up for the first time. "What do they want from us now?" Agent Collins consulted her tablet before answering. "They've requested formal communication with our governments, but they've also specifically asked to speak with Emma. They want to understand the motivations behind her actions." "They want to interview her?" Emma's grandmother's voice carried a note of protective concern. "More than that," Dr. Martinez said carefully. "They've indicated that they consider Emma to be what they call a primary source of cultural significance. In their understanding, she may be the key to comprehending human psychology and social structures." Before Emma could respond, every electronic device in the house activated simultaneously. Phones, tablets, the television, even the digital clock on the microwave, all began displaying the same message in flowing, alien script that somehow resolved itself into perfectly readable English. "We request communication with the human called Emma Chen. We wish to understand the nature of mercy." Agent Collins was already reaching for her radio when the message changed. "We mean no harm to the child or her family. We understand that humans value their young and protect them carefully. We share this instinct. If the child is willing, we will speak gently and with great care." Emma felt a strange calm settle over her as she read the words. Somehow the alien intelligence reaching across space to contact her directly felt less frightening than the government officials sitting in her living room. "What would happen if I said yes?" she asked. Dr. Martinez exchanged glances with Agent Collins before answering. "We honestly don't know. This is completely unprecedented. No human has ever had direct communication with an alien intelligence. But they've been studying us for 3 days," Emma pointed out. "They must understand something about how we work by now." The message on the screens changed again. "We have observed your species from a distance. We have analyzed your communications, your cultures, your histories. But observation cannot teach us what we need to know. We must understand the heart of mercy, not just its external manifestations." Emma's grandmother rose from her chair and moved to stand behind her granddaughter. "If Emma chooses to speak with them, I'll be right here with her." Agent Collins looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, with respect, this is a matter of national security. We need to establish proper protocols." "The Kethmaran have bypassed your protocols," Emma interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. "They're talking directly to me because they want to understand something that can't be learned through official channels." The screens flickered, and new text appeared. "The child speaks wisdom. Government representatives think in terms of strategy and advantage. We seek understanding of something deeper. We will speak now if the child permits." Emma looked around the room at the anxious faces of the adults who were supposed to be protecting her, then at her grandmother's encouraging nod. "Okay," she said simply. "I'll talk to you." The change was immediate and profound. The air in the room seemed to thicken, taking on an almost electrical quality that made the hair on everyone's arms stand up. Then, without any visible technology or apparatus, a voice spoke directly into their minds. But unlike the overwhelming broadcast that had reached every human on Earth, this communication was gentle, almost tentative. It felt like someone speaking softly across a vast distance, trying not to startle or frighten. "Hello, Emma Chen. I am Hunt Leader Vexithera of the Kethmaran Fleet. I have lived for 800 of your years and have journeyed across 47 star systems in pursuit of justice. Yet I have never encountered anything like the mercy you showed to our dying quarry." Emma found that she could respond simply by thinking clearly and directing her thoughts outward. "Hello, I'm sorry about what happened to him." He seemed like he was in a lot of pain. There was a pause, and when the alien voice returned, it carried a note of something that might have been wonder. "You apologize for his suffering, though he was our enemy. You express regret for pain experienced by one who had killed members of other species. This is what we cannot comprehend. Why do you feel sorrow for the suffering of those who would harm you?" Emma considered the question seriously. It was something she had never really thought about before. Her response to the dying creature had been instinctive, automatic. "Because suffering is suffering," she said finally. "It doesn't matter who's experiencing it. Pain hurts, and being alone when you're dying must be terrible. I wouldn't want to die alone, so I didn't want him to die alone either. Even though he was dangerous, he wasn't dangerous anymore. He was just dying and scared." Another pause, longer this time. Emma could sense something vast moving in the alien intelligence, like watching storm clouds gather on a distant horizon. "In 800 years of life, I have captured or killed 7,341 criminals across the galaxy. Not once have I considered their fear or loneliness. I focused only on justice, on ensuring they could harm no others. You suggest there was something else I should have considered?" Emma felt the weight of the alien's experience pressing against her mind. Centuries of hunting, countless encounters with the worst that intelligent species could produce, a lifetime devoted to harsh but necessary justice. "I'm not saying you were wrong," she said carefully. "I don't know anything about your job or the criminals you caught. But maybe there's room for both, justice and kindness." "Explain." Emma looked at her grandmother, drawing strength from the older woman's encouraging smile. "My grandmother always told me that being strong doesn't mean being cruel. You can stop someone from hurting people without forgetting that there's still a person who can feel pain and fear. Maybe the real strength is being able to do what's necessary while still caring about everyone involved." The silence that followed stretched for nearly a minute. When Vexthara's voice returned, it was thoughtful and subdued. "For 40,000 years, my people have believed that mercy was weakness, that compassion compromised justice, that to protect the innocent we must become as ruthless as those we hunt. But you suggest a different path." "I don't know about paths," Emma said honestly. "I just know that when I saw him dying, he looked scared and alone. And that seemed more important than anything else he might have done. You saw past his actions to his essential nature as a conscious being experiencing suffering." "I guess so, yes, Agent." Collins and Dr. Martinez were frantically taking notes, trying to record a conversation that was rewriting humanity's understanding of both diplomacy and consciousness. But Emma was focused entirely on the vast ancient intelligence touching her mind across impossible distances. "Emma Chen," Vexithera said finally, "you have taught us something in minutes that we failed to learn in millennia. We came to your world expecting to find another." General Robert Harrison stood in the Pentagon Situation Room, staring at intelligence reports that made his blood run cold. For 1 week, the Kethmaran fleet had remained peaceful, engaging in cultural exchanges and philosophical discussions that had captivated the world's media. But now, disturbing patterns were emerging from deep space monitoring. "Stations, show me the data again," he commanded the intelligence analyst, the wall screens filled with astronomical readings from the outer solar system. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures moving toward Earth from multiple directions. Based on spectral analysis and approach vectors, these aren't Kethmaran ships." "How many?" "At least 40 vessels, sir. Possibly more. And they're not following the same peaceful approach pattern as the Kethmaran fleet. These ships are running dark, using stealth technology to mask their signatures until they're almost on top of us. Harrison felt his worst fears crystallizing. The Kethmaran's arrival had been broadcast across multiple star systems, and now it appeared that other alien civilizations were converging on Earth. The question was whether they were coming as friends or enemies. Estimated time to arrival: 18 hours for the fastest ships, sir. Meanwhile, aboard the Kethmaran flagship, Hunt leader Vex Thara was dealing with a crisis of her own. The fleet's council chamber buzzed with agitated conversation as senior hunters argued over the radical changes their leader was proposing to. Millennia of tradition. You speak of abandoning everything we are, Hunt Second Krentax declared, his bioluminescent patches flashing with anger. 40,000 years of proven methods cast aside because of words spoken by an alien child to a dying criminal. Those words revealed truths we had forgotten? Vexithara replied calmly. They showed us possibilities we had never considered. Possibilities that will make us weak, Hunt Third Zilnova interjected. If we show mercy to criminals, if we consider their suffering instead of focusing on justice, we will lose the fear that makes our presence effective. Criminals will no longer flee at the mention of our approach. Vexthara gestured toward the holographic display showing Earth below them. Look at this world, Zilnova. Humans have criminals too, perhaps more per capita than most species we've encountered. Yet they also have art, music, literature, scientific advancement that rivals our own despite their youth. They have achieved this not by eliminating all darkness, but by choosing to nurture light alongside justice. Pretty words, Krentax rumbled. But words don't protect innocent worlds from raiders and slavers. Our strength does. Our reputation does. Our absolute commitment to justice does. The debate was interrupted by Huntkeeper Thelmiran, who entered the chamber with obvious urgency. Hunt leader, we have a problem. We're detecting multiple fleets converging on this system. Species we've encountered before, some we've hunted, others who have reason to fear our presence. Vexthara's focus sharpened immediately. Show me. The display filled with tactical information showing the approaching vessels. Vexithara recognized several of the ship designs immediately. Raiders from the Zorvath Confederacy, slaver fleets from the hegemony of Suls, mercenary squadrons that had been fleeing Kethmaran justice for decades. They see an opportunity, she realized. They believe that if the Kethmaran have stopped at one world for extended observation, we may have grown soft. Or perhaps they seek to test whether our protection of Earth is genuine. This is the result of your philosophical experiments, Krentax said grimly. Word of our unusual behavior has spread. The galaxy's predators are converging to test our resolve. On Earth, Emma Chen was experiencing problems of her own. The daily conversations with Vexthara had made her a global celebrity, but not everyone viewed her newfound fame positively. Protesters had gathered outside her grandmother's property, carrying signs that read "Human Traitor" and "Earth First." She's just a child, Emma's grandmother argued with Agent Collins, who had arrived with a security detail. These people are acting like she's responsible for some kind of alien invasion. Some people see her communications with the Kethmaran as collaboration with a potential enemy, Collins explained. There are factions that believe we should be preparing for war, not philosophical discussions. Emma watched from her bedroom window as news vans lined the road and police barriers held back crowds of both supporters and detractors. Signs reading "Mercy is weakness" competed with others declaring, "Emma shows the way to peace." Her phone buzzed with a message that made her heart sink. It was from her best friend Jessica, someone she had known since elementary school. "My dad says you're putting all of humanity at risk by trusting aliens. Maybe we shouldn't hang out anymore." The rejection hurt more than the protesters or the media attention. Emma had never asked to become the face of human-alien relations. She had simply tried to comfort a dying creature, and now the entire world was judging her for it. That evening's communication with Vexithara carried a different tone than previous conversations. The alien leader's mental voice was tense, preoccupied with concerns that extended far beyond their philosophical discussions. "Emma, I must tell you something that may change how your people view us. Other species are approaching your world. Criminals and predators who see our presence here as either weakness or opportunity." Emma felt a chill of fear. "Are we in danger?" "Not while the Kethmaran fleet remains. But our protection of Earth is being tested. If we respond to these threats, As we always have, with overwhelming force and absolute justice, it will demonstrate that our conversations with you have not truly changed us. But if you don't respond that way, then Earth may face attacks from species that have been kept in check only by fear of Kethmaran retaliation. Emma understood the impossible position her alien friend was facing. Show mercy and risk appearing weak to galactic predators, respond with traditional Kethmaran methods, and prove that their philosophical evolution was superficial. What do you want to do? Emma asked. I want to try something that has never been attempted in 40,000 years of Kethmaran history. I want to offer the approaching criminals a chance to leave peacefully, to demonstrate mercy even to those who have shown none to others. And if they refuse? Then we will protect your world, but we will do so with regret rather than satisfaction. We will mourn the necessity of violence rather than celebrating the triumph of justice. Emma could sense the profound uncertainty in Vexithara's mental voice. The alien leader was preparing to risk everything on principles learned from a human child's simple act of compassion. I'm scared, Emma admitted. As am I. But perhaps fear shared with friends is easier to bear than fear faced alone. I'll be here, Emma promised. Whatever happens, I'll be here. The next morning brought news that sent shockwaves around the world. The approaching alien fleets had been detected by every major space agency, and their intentions were clearly hostile. Intercepted communications spoke of easy prey and defenseless world, and testing Kethmaran resolve. World leaders demanded immediate military response from the Kethmaran, while others argued that Earth should prepare its own defenses. The philosophical questions that had dominated the news for a week suddenly seemed irrelevant in the face of imminent threat. But Emma found herself thinking about something Vexithara had said during their first conversation. True strength might not be the ability to destroy enemies, but the courage to show mercy even when faced with violence. As she watched the approaching ships on news feeds, growing closer to Earth with each passing hour, Emma realized that both species were about to discover whether compassion could survive its first real test. The galaxy was watching. History was being written, and a 14-year-old girl's whispered words to a dying alien had set in motion events that would determine the future of multiple civilizations. Emma just hoped she had been right to offer comfort to a stranger in the woods, because now the fate of two worlds might depend on whether mercy was truly stronger than fear. The moment of truth arrived as 43 hostile ships entered Earth's outer atmosphere, their weapon systems powering up with energy signatures that made every monitoring station on the planet scream warnings. In the Pentagon Situation Room, General Harrison watched helplessly as vessels, capable of reducing cities to ash, positioned themselves above major population centers. But the Kethmaran response was unlike anything in their recorded history. Instead of immediately attacking the intruders, Vexithara transmitted a message on all frequencies that reached every ship in the system simultaneously. Her words carried the authority of 800 years of experience, but also something new, a note of genuine sadness for what might be about to happen. To the fleets of the Zorvath, the hegemony and the mercenary squadrons now threatening Earth, I am Hunt Leader Vexithara of the Kethmaran. You know our reputation. You understand our capabilities. But today, I offer you something we have never offered before, the choice to leave in peace. Aboard the flagship of the Zorvath raiders, Commander Thekvor laughed with genuine amusement. In 3 centuries of piracy across 12 star systems, he had never heard a Kethmaran offer mercy to criminals. It confirmed what his intelligence network had suggested. The legendary hunters had grown soft. Vexithara of the Kethmaran, he responded, his words dripping with contempt. Your weakness is known throughout the galaxy. You sit in orbit around a primitive world, exchanging philosophy with its inhabitants instead of imposing order. We reject your mercy and claim this system as our prize. The first attack came from the hegemony vessels, massive ships designed for capturing and processing entire populations into slavery. Their weapons struck not at the Kethmaran fleet, but at Earth's communication satellites attempting to isolate the planet from outside contact. Emma Chen felt the moment when everything changed. She was sitting in her grandmother's kitchen, maintaining mental contact with Vexithara as the crisis unfolded, when the alien leader's thoughts suddenly filled with a profound sadness. They have chosen violence over mercy. Vexithera's mental voice carried across the impossible distance between them. They force us to respond as we always have. I'm sorry, Emma replied, understanding that her attempts to teach the Kethmaran about compassion had seemingly failed at the first real test. No, young one. You misunderstand. We will respond as we always have, but we will do so with hearts that now comprehend the cost of such responses. You have not changed what we must do. You have changed who we are while doing it. What happened next? Redefine the meaning of justice in the galaxy. The Kethmaran counterattack was as swift and devastating as their reputation promised. Their ships moved with impossible grace. Weapon systems that bent reality itself, reducing the most powerful raider vessels to expanding clouds of particles in moments. But for the first time in their history, they also offered quarter. Surrender now, Vexthera broadcasted to the surviving enemy ships, and we will spare your lives. Your crews will face justice, but they will face it with dignity and the opportunity for redemption. 3 of the smaller mercenary squadrons, seeing their larger allies obliterated with casual efficiency, immediately powered down their weapons and transmitted surrender codes. It was the first time in recorded galactic history that beings had surrendered to the Kethmaran and been offered anything other than immediate execution or imprisonment. But the majority of the attacking forces chose to fight to the end, driven by centuries of fear and hatred for the species that had hunted them across the stars. The battle lasted only 17 minutes, but its effects would resonate for generations. When the shooting stopped, space around Earth was filled with debris from 38 destroyed ships and 5 vessels, containing terrified survivors who couldn't believe they were still alive. On Earth, every human watched in amazement as the Kethmaran systematically rescued the crews of disabled enemy vessels, providing medical aid to beings who had been trying to kill them moments before. Why save them? Asked one of the captured mercenary captains during the emergency tribunal that followed. We came here to raid your protected world. We would have shown no mercy to you or the humans. Hunt leader Vexithera stood before the assembled prisoners, her ancient form bearing new scars from the battle but radiating a dignity that transcended mere victory, because a human child taught us that mercy is not weakness but the highest form of strength. Because choosing compassion when you have the power to choose cruelty is what separates civilization from chaos. The prisoners were processed according to Kethmaran law, but for the first time in their history, those laws included provisions for rehabilitation and eventual freedom. Criminals who showed genuine remorse and willingness to change would be given opportunities to make amends for their actions rather than simply being eliminated as threats. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as news of the battle and its aftermath spread across every inhabited system. The Kethmaran had proven they were still the most feared hunters in known space, but they had also demonstrated something that challenged every assumption about justice and punishment. On Earth, the crisis had an unexpected unifying effect. The humans who had protested Emma's communications with the aliens now saw her as the architect of a new kind of protection, one that defended them not just with superior force, but with principles that elevated everyone involved. President Walsh addressed the world from the same podium where she had announced humanity's first contact with alien intelligence. Emma Chen, a 14-year-old girl from rural Oregon, has done something that experienced diplomats and military strategists thought impossible. She has helped our protectors remember the difference between justice and vengeance, between strength and cruelty. Emma herself remained remarkably unaffected by the global attention. When news crews asked her how it felt to have changed the course of galactic history, she simply said, "I just didn't want him to die alone." Everything else was up to them. In the months that followed, the Kethmaran established a permanent presence in Earth's solar system, but their role evolved far beyond simple protection. They became teachers and students, sharing their advanced technology while learning about human approaches to conflict resolution, rehabilitation, and social cooperation. The criminal survivors of the failed attack became the first subjects of a revolutionary new justice system that combined Kethmaran efficiency with human compassion. Some proved irredeemable and were confined accordingly, but others surprised everyone by embracing the opportunity for redemption they had never been offered before. Most remarkably, word of the new approach spread throughout the galaxy, faster than any military conquest could have achieved. Species that had lived in terror of Kethmaran justice began to see them as potential allies, rather than inevitable enemies. Criminal organizations found their recruitment dropping as individuals chose rehabilitation over resistance. Huntkeeper Thelmiran documented these changes in the growing archives, noting that the Kethmaran were experiencing their greatest period of galactic influence in 40,000 years, not through increased violence, but through decreased reliance on violence as the only solution to conflict. "We are becoming what we were always meant to be," she recorded. "Not just hunters, but healers. Not just judges, but teachers. Not just enforcers of law, but guardians of hope." Vexthara continued her regular communications with Emma, but their conversations gradually evolved from philosophical discussions to practical collaboration on specific problems. When mining accidents trapped workers on distant worlds, Kethmaran ships carried human rescue specialists. When human colonies faced natural disasters, alien technology provided aid that saved millions of lives. The relationship between the two species became a model for cooperation that other civilizations began to emulate. Trade networks replaced raiding routes. Scientific collaboration led to breakthroughs that benefited dozens of worlds. Cultural exchanges produced art and music that neither species could have created alone. Emma Chen grew up in a universe transformed by her simple act of compassion. By the time she graduated from high school, humans were active members of a galactic community where Kethmaran hunters worked alongside human mediators to resolve conflicts without bloodshed whenever possible. On the 5th anniversary of first contact, Emma returned to the forest where it all began. The clearing looked exactly as it had that October afternoon, peaceful and ordinary, showing no sign of the extraordinary events that had taken place there. She knelt in the spot where the dying alien had breathed his last, placing her hand on the earth where she had offered comfort to a stranger. "Thank you," she whispered to the memory of that moment, "for showing me that sometimes the smallest kindnesses have the biggest consequences." High above, invisible to human eyes but present nonetheless, Kethmaran ships continued their eternal patrol. But now they carried a new mission alongside their ancient duty to hunt criminals and protect the innocent. They carried hope, the hope that mercy could coexist with justice, that enemies could become allies, and that the whispered words of a human child to a dying alien could echo across the stars forever. Emma had learned that true strength wasn't about having the power to destroy your enemies. It was about